Okay, I think we're live. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Good morning, Rob. Lovely to see you.
Morning.
So we're doing something slightly different today. For those of you who've joined us before, lovely to see you again. For those of you who are new, I'm Sam Armondi, Managing Director and Co-founder here at Thought Quarter. We're a software development agency, and we specifically focus on digital products for businesses with purpose. And today, we're being joined by Rob Nicholls. Perhaps, Rob, you can introduce yourself
Good to
rather than
see
me
you, Sam.
butchering it.
Thanks very much, Sam. I'm a CFO, a portfolio CFO, fractional CFO, board advisor, and non-executive director. Been doing this about 3 or 4 decades now. Back in the UK, 5 years. Previous to that, more than 2 decades living and working in the US as a CFO, board advisor, and non-exec. So I help small businesses and small, medium-sized businesses grow, make more money, expand margins, expand profitability, increase sales, and create value for the shareholders. That's what I'm about.
Excellent. So you might be wondering why a tech person and a finance person are joining each other on a webinar instead of fighting each other as we usually do for budgets. But there is a bigger play here. I think Rob and I were talking in the lead up to this webinar about the value that can be created by combining tech and finance. And am I right, Rob, that you have quite a background in tech as well?
Yeah, I mean, I spent 25 years working for a US technology firm, all manner of different things, cellular, satellite, all manner of big systems, and I've done most things in between as well.
Fantastic. So I guess the first bit that I'd love to dive into when we were speaking in the prep session for this, you were mentioning that often you find that the board and the CFO talk a different language to the language that maybe the project sponsors or the technical people are trying to talk when they justify their projects. How do you think we can go about helping our audience unite those conversations?
So from experience, there is a gulf. There is a gulf. And I mean this no disrespect to technologists, IT people. We do work in different worlds. And I think that the closer CIOs, CTOs get to the real world business opportunities, operations, the better. And it really is difficult sometimes to bring to the board, to bring to the CFO, the CEO, decisions that need to be made, because quite often they're so focused on allocation of capital, whether that's people or projects or acquisitions of facilities and so forth. They really do work on a different timeline and a different focus on the payback. It really is, it's quite short term in many respects, whereas a lot of IT projects tend to be longer term, perhaps 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. I just had a project that we can talk about a little bit later that's been canned after 18 months with literally zero output that is of value. And that is a real problem for that business. They spent probably close to £250,000 on that development. And it really was because the objectives were not aligned. The focus on business and returns was not aligned. The timeline was a mismatch. There was a whole raft of different issues that we wrestled with before we put this project to bed, so to speak. And it really did it was kicked off without sufficient information. The opportunity to bring in all singing, all dancing, in this case, it was a bespoke CRM system, just wasn't really thought through. It really wasn't thought through. And I came on board about 6 months after the project had kicked off. But it was largely because the timeline wasn't aligned, the objectives weren't aligned, and we weren't really talking about the same thing. Management and the board and the directors are really looking at returns on a really quite short time frame. Whether it's this quarter, next quarter, certainly within the financial year. Anything beyond the financial year return today is really difficult to get over the line, because I've got competing demands for those dollars, that capital, if you will. Do I bring 2 or 3 new business development marketing developers online, or do I outsource and put in £150,000 on an outsourced ERP system, CRM system, whatever it may be? And it really is a decision. Do I do A or do I do B? And I think technologists, CIOs, CTOs need to do a better job of bringing it into the real world. How is it going to increase sales? How is it going to improve margins? How is it going to increase profitability? And how long is the value creation before it comes to the business? If you're going to spend 100, 150, 200,000 pounds, what is the timeline? I need to see real tangible benefits, whether that return on capital, return on invested capital, additional sales, incremental margin expansion. How quickly? And the sooner you can show me that, the more likely you're going to get the green light.
That makes sense. And I think you're describing competition there, aren't you? And I think as technologists, we automatically assume that the tech is the number one priority, but actually understanding the...
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a zero-sum game. The opportunity cost of not doing this project is I can bring 3 new headcount in place. That'll increase my sales by 10%, for example, or I can bring 2 new people on and expand margins by increasing sales. Maybe then we can afford to do this project. It is a competing demand. And, you know, a new shiny project, opportunity, ERP, a new CRM, a new bespoke CRM system. I'll try not to mention the name of the developer because that would be wrong, but it's a competition for the allocation of resources. And the faster you understand that and the better you get on the side that's going to win that conversation, and believe me, the CFO or the head of finance or the finance director and the CEO are going to make that decision.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess I always like to think about practical takeaways for our listeners in these discussions. And probably the first one that's standing out for me, correct me if I'm wrong, is to not be afraid to talk about money as part of the project setup. You know, the payback,
I think you have to.
Has to be, you know, really it has to be discussed in the first stage of the project. It's not something that you figure out once you have a business case. It's actually the business case is the driver of the project, isn't it?
Someone once said about me in my role as a CFO when I was leading at the time, probably about $100 million turnover business, was I, as the CFO, could be your best friend or your worst nightmare. Because if you don't get my buy-in, sign off, yea, verily, this is the right thing we should be doing, I'm going to fight you all the way. I'm going to find all warts and all. I'm going to find the problems. I'm going to find the reason not to allocate funds to this on an ongoing basis. You know, it's not one and done. It's not £10,000 here, never another penny. It's generally 3-4 quarters. You're not going to get that funding, and you don't want a half-assed project that delivers nothing. So you have that conversation up front, and you're certainly in a better position to move the ball down the field, if you will.
Definitely. So I suppose picking on that thing of, as a CFO, you can be the best friend or worst enemy. One of the phrases that I've certainly heard you use a few times, and our listeners may have come across on your LinkedIn post, is ask your CFO. So let's just pick on that for a second, and let's try and work through some kind of fictional project. In your head, how do you decide if a particular project is worth doing? And then how do you decide whether that project is best done in-house? You know, you talk about using that capital to bring resources on stream, do it yourself, or whether it's worth outsourcing. And, you know, as an outsourcer, I appreciate this is a high-risk question for me to ask, but let's see where it goes.
No, I think you'll be okay. So just take a step back. As the CFO, I have a lot of responsibilities for a lot of businesses. And in some ways, it's accounting, it's finance, it's oftentimes now logistics, it's oftentimes supply chain, it's oftentimes HR, legal, facilities, all manner of different things. So any IT project, any development is going to touch any one of those aspects in the business, let alone sales and marketing. The CFO, the finance director is going to be involved. Okay. They are going to be involved. And you have to get that person on your side pretty quickly. I've seen so many projects that run for so long that haven't got over the line and delivered something to the client that it's just not worth it. I mean, it's just not worth carrying on for. So quite often a lot of these projects will be killed, will be canned early because they haven't got the thought process. And the CEO is often mindful of this now, that they will defer to the CFO. Can we afford this? Is this the right time to do this? Tell me again, what was your initial premise? What was your initial question? Because I know we want to talk about outsourcing. I'm a big believer in outsourcing. I do not think you have the capability in-house to carry these projects through. I've got a client, a 50-person client here in the Southwest. They had one operations manager that was trying to drive a multi-$100,000 CRM project. She didn't have the capability. She didn't have the knowledge. And we moved it out. We outsourced the development. It still didn't work. What we should have done from day one was set clear criteria around the outsourcing. I'm a huge believer in outsourcing to third parties. We are not a developer. We don't have the skill sets. We do what we do. We provide services to our clients or products to our clients. We don't develop systems, capabilities, and so forth. So the first thing I want to do is I don't want to touch a project in-house. I don't have the manpower. I don't have the skill set. I don't have the knowledge to manage it. I want to give it to someone like Thought Quarter and say, here's the timeline, here's the requirements, here's the budget. Can we do it? And that's probably to be honest, is end of story.
It's a good takeaway for our listeners, isn't it? Yeah,
I just don't want to do it. You have to, I outsource my cleaning. I outsource my facilities management. I outsource my CRM system. I outsource my accounting system. I don't want to develop those things in-house. My time and my staff's time is far better focused on growing the business, business development, marketing, sales, running the business for the client experience. I do not want to touch these projects. So it's not even a thought process. We are not going to do it in-house. It's going to be outsourced. Find the best partner to do that.
Great. So that's probably another good takeaway for our listeners, isn't it? Often that there can be this fear of approaching finance that you have to justify the outsource. And actually, it's the wrong argument to be having, isn't it? The argument should be around the value of the project.
Yeah, maybe 30 years ago, we might have considered the capability of bringing a couple of developers in-house. It is fraught with problems. You're never going to get the outcome you want. You're never going to get it on the timeline, on the budget. I've got another client up in London that is developing in-house a system to manage e-commerce delivery with thousands and thousands of lines of items. And they tried to do it all in-house. They brought 3 or 4 developers in-house. And here we are 3 years on, still nothing that the client is tangibly going to be able to use. It's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. You've got to outsource. It shouldn't even be a decision. It should just be an acceptance. We're going to outsource it. So I wouldn't even touch that going forward. And I wouldn't recommend any of my clients trying to do that.
Great. So I guess picking on that theme, you assemble your best 3 potential outsourcers, etc. I guess then the next question that comes into the finance discussion is price. There can be an assumption that finance will always go for the lowest price. Is that a fair view, would you say?
So I think it might have been. To be honest, I think 3 is a little bit shortchanging. I would be looking for 4 to 5 opportunities. And what I always do is I drop the lowest and I drop the highest and look at the 1, 2, or 3 options in the middle and say, Do they deliver it to me on the timeline that I want? Do I like them? Can I trust them? Have they got repeatable experience? Are there testimonials, recommendations from people who've worked with them on a similar project? So for me, price is not the number one criteria. It's, can I work with them? Do I trust them? Have they got repeatable experience? Yeah, maybe I'm going to pay 10 or 20% more, but I'm going to be more likely to get the outcome for my business and my clients than I would expect. Taking the lowest price is never a good option in any book, in my opinion. Taking the highest option, probably not the right business decision. So, you know, if I can get 5 quotes, I'll drop the top and I'll drop the bottom, and I'll evaluate the 3 in the middle. It could be 2 in the middle against my criteria: timeline, deliverability, and experience of other people delivering a similar project to a similar sort of client. So I would certainly say it's not finance.
Yeah. And I guess that's really comforting to hear for our audience as well, because again, it reinforces the view that finance is there to protect the business and help it grow, not to limit expenditure. That's
absolutely. No, I mean, what really excites me as a CFO are 2 things: growth in the business and cash. And if a project can generate cash and can deliver growth to the business, if I can take a business from 5, 8, 12% growth to 18, 20, 25% annualized sales growth, and it'll deliver cash, it's going to get the green light and the support from the head of finance or the board. It depends. You know, the CFO, you want to use your CFO to leverage into the board. We should be doing this. For example, one of my clients came to me about a year ago, wanting to do something a little bit different in terms of capability for the business. It wasn't a large expenditure. It was probably $8,000. I instantly just looked at it and say, does it increase the capability of the business to grow revenue? Yes. Does it generate additional revenue that we can convert to cash pretty quickly? Yes. So straight off the bat, it's a win. It's a win. It's going to be likely to be approved. So I would say leverage the relation. And it's all about relationships, isn't it, Sam? If you've got a good relationship with the decision maker, whether it's the CEO or the CFO, you're onto a better wicket. And I would also add that you need multiple connections into that organization. So if I want to win a client opportunity, I will often not just work with one individual. I'll work with 2 or 3 other people and have connections with them and have conversations with them, because you want to have a cadre of supporters. You want to have other people saying, yeah, verily, we should be doing this. We should be making this investment, and convincing the board, the CFO and the CEO to do that.
Absolutely. I call them white knights, building up a little team of internal influencers that can support the project. And I think we encourage our clients and prospective clients to do that as well, because if there is that groundswell internally, it carries itself, doesn't it? And interestingly, we're going to come back to your comment, John. Someone on LinkedIn has just commented on outsourcing versus doing things internally, so we'll pick that up in a second. But I think, John, it plays to your point of doing things with a team rather than to a team. And if you can build that internal groundswell, it becomes an internal exercise rather than kind of an external solution forced upon a team. But I was just picking up on those 3 things that you talked about. Your criteria, you talked about timeline, deliverability, and experience of previous projects. So I guess what I'd really like us to give to our listeners is some kind of guideline on creating a fully baked project proposal. Because often I'll have conversations with a prospective client, will kind of elaborate a services proposal, but then they have to turn that into an internal proposal. So what does the perfect finance proposal look like when it lands in your inbox?
So going back to my 2 criteria is cash and growth. Is what does the capability of this proposal do for the business to move the ball down the field, if you will? And the first thing I'm looking for is, does it increase sales? If it doesn't increase sales, that's fine. But does the proposal increase sales? If it does increase sales or our sales capability or our conversion of opportunities to sales, that's going to get a check mark. Is it going to deliver in this financial year, for example? Another check mark. Within the next 12 months, certainly that's another check mark as well. Does it affect our capability of a business to generate cash? Cash is the lifeblood of the business. If it enables my business to generate cash at a faster rate, to convert sales at a faster rate, you're onto a good opportunity there as well. So those are the sorts of things that I'm looking for. I do not want to encumber staff within the business additional responsibilities. I can't expect them to do their existing role and manage another project or an outsource. So I have to make sure that the existing capability in the business, I don't want to be bringing on additional headcount to manage an outsourced project, but equally I don't want them to be have another half a job on top of their existing job. So I cannot be backfilling other people to manage an outsourced project as well. It's got to be the outsourcer. They are responsible for. You can report back into us on a frequent basis, but the timeline is important. Things in business move so quickly now. Headcount turns over. You might be facing a different CFO. You might be facing a different managing director or CEO. Client perspectives move so quickly now. Buyers buy differently. They buy differently in the last 2 or 3 years, more differently than they have in the last 10 years, if you will. Timelines are getting longer as well. Business decisions are taking much, much longer. And you can short circuit those decision making by building a good proposal that talks about sales increases, a timeline that is within, that is reasonable, if you will. I don't want to be looking at projects that are talking 2028, 2029. They have to be deliverable pretty much in 2025 at this point. If I was kicking off a proposal today, I need to see deliverables, financials that come in the next 12 to 15 months at most, to be honest. I think there's a compression of the timeline of the benefits of an opportunity today from perhaps 2 to 3 years to more like 15 to 18 months max. So the expectation from the board, from the CEO, from the CFO is there's a shortened timeline because things are just moving more quickly.
That's the key thing that I keep hearing, not just from you, but from the market as well. There is a desire for rapid value, and the onus is on us as solution providers, as internal innovators, to actually lay out that roadmap to value. And it's fine to present a 3-year roadmap, but you can only really sell the first 12 months of it. That's what people are interested in. Interestingly,
and the business environment is changing. It's changing so rapidly. I worked with a project 25 years ago where we didn't revisit the original assumptions, and by the time the project was delivered, it was a massive project. The whole marketplace had changed, and there was no market for the product that the project was delivering. And that's the same today. You don't have 2 or 3 years to develop something now. You have 2 or 3 quarters. And then we need to see it and evaluate it to where the market is today, because buyers and buyers' behavior are changing so rapidly now. I mean, we're going to have another inflection point in the next 45 days with a budget. That's going to change things significantly as well. That's going to change things internally, tax rates, opportunity, the timeline. That's going to change things again. So we're going to have a different environment in the next 60 days, certainly.
Yeah, 100%. I was speaking at a software agency conference last week, and the massive shocker stat that came out was that the majority of deals this year had been closed in less than 3 months. And the consensus was that those that are closing quickly are the ones that are really well aligned, because businesses are at the moment seem to be risk averse, but recognize the need to invest. So to me, it really crystallizes your point of, if the proposal is packaged up correctly and it hits those points that you've made, the sales conversion, timeline of the next 12 months, is it cash positive rather than cash negative? and is it actually going to enhance rather than degrade the business capability? There are cases out there where it's a no-brainer. That why would the business not do it? That's makes perfect sense.
And you've got to recognize there's always the job of management is a competing alternative. Where do I spend the capital? Is this the right project, or should I just bring an additional headcount on, or should I open a new office? There's always an alternative use of the cash. So you've got to make a pretty good case in your proposal that this is the right thing to do for the business and now is the right time to do it. Otherwise, we can just kick the can down the road 12 months. We'll have a look at it again October next year.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a practical example. I had a discussion with a prospective client yesterday, and we went through something very similar to the matrix that you described. And we're saying, what impact is this going to have on cash generation? Well, actually, inside 6 months, this gives us an incremental revenue stream that we can sell on a subscription basis. Okay, tick. What impact does it have on internal resource utilization? Well, actually, in the first 6 months, we reckon we can reduce the time spent by our most expensive scientists by 75% on low value work. Tick. And all of a sudden, the proposal, as you say, writes itself. It turns into an innovation that we cannot afford not to do. I know we've got a few minutes left. I just want to head back to what you mentioned earlier. You talked about this client that you helped to decide can a project. How did you figure out that was an innovation that you can afford not to do? Because I'm guessing there was a good reason why that project started.
Well, just a bit of background, that the client didn't really have a lot of technical capability. They had really a very limited tech stack, if you will. And they realized they needed to have some new technology. And it was more of an ERP, CRM system capability. They work in the build environment, but it was a significant project. It was a couple of hundred that was going to be put into it. We didn't really think through, and I came on board about 6 months after the project had been kicked off, and I just kept, and I wasn't really involved in the decision-making process about doing it. And I just realized very quickly that there was a better way to do it, a faster way to do it, a less costly way to do it. And it wasn't going to deliver the capability for the client internally that they needed. There was no additional cash generation. There was no additional sales revenue going to be generated. It was really just digitizing the capabilities internally. And I quickly realized that there was far better use for that capital than just digitizing existing processes. Really, we need to look at the engagement with the outside as well. And it was a CRM system, a bespoke custom CRM system. It was wrong. It was the wrong time. It was the wrong price. Although it was completely outsourced, we had 2 people within the business that were overviewing it. They didn't really have the experience, knowledge, perspective to be able to ask the really tough questions. The timeline kept ticking, and we were 18 months into it. And at the end of the day, we just said, it's not going to work. There was no capitalized software that we could put on the balance sheet and depreciate. There was nothing really of value that we generated. And that's another thing. You've got to have something tangible of value to show to your shareholders, to your stakeholders, your board of directors. This is what we've done. This is what we spent the money on. This is what it's generating. And that development just could not do that. And so we canned it. We made a decision to can it. It was the right decision then.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the gold nugget, isn't it? If an innovation delivers sales growth, cash generation, and it is very visibly an asset within the business, as a CFO, your view is you can't afford to not do it. That's really the key takeaway, isn't it? If we
you want to create the scenario where I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no. Yeah. I couldn't say no.
And on that bombshell, I think it's a good place to finish. I always pride myself on keeping these things exactly on time. So, Rob, thank you for sharing all of those snippets. There's a lot there, so we're going to take a little bit of time to package it up. We'll be sharing it on LinkedIn with a few of these tips and suggestions. And hope you'll join me in thanking Rob for all of his insights. If any of you listening would like an introduction or would like me to connect you with Rob, just let me know, and it would be an absolute pleasure. Rob, thank you so much. We'll let you get back to golf today, or anything else.
Tomorrow.
Take care. See you soon.
Good to see you. All the best.
Bye.